stress, hurt, and loss. If hurt manages to get into your boundary, it's now called anger. If loss manages to get into your boundary, it's now called anxiety. Okay? So if you let the stress get to you through having a weak boundary, or what I call holes in your boundary, that I talk about in Mind OS, then its name changes. Now you own it. Now the stress is actually part of your being, part of your attitude, part of your emotions. You're more of an angry person now, or more of an anxious person, depending on the kind of stress that it was. So here's another way of looking at it. Focusing down just on anger, if hurt, kind of stress called hurt gets into you, you are now angry. The exact amount of hurt that got into you is the exact amount of anger you now feel. Okay? Anyone ever hear of matter and antimatter? What happens if matter and antimatter collide? Explosion happens and they both cease to exist. The matter disappears and the antimatter disappears. They both cease to exist. So if stress, which is a negative energy, specifically the one called hurt, gets into you, it is specifically going to knock out the type of self-esteem in you that we will call well-being. Okay? Hurt is a type of stress. If it gets into you, it will knock out an exactly equal amount of the type of self-esteem called well-being and diminish it by that exact amount. Okay? Let me give you an example. Say that, what do I mean by hurt? Somebody emotionally hurts you. We talked about it in terms of the thalamus area of the brain earlier. I was talking about Columbine, the Columbine tragedy, and Dr. Robert Gallitzer-Levy's studies about that. Okay, hurt creates pain. Does it have to be physical hurt? No. It could be, but it could also be an emotional hurt. So we're kind of talking about the thalamus there. Creates pain. If a bee stings you, how do you feel? You feel pain, and what do you feel emotionally? You slap it away, right? That's why. If somebody insults you, could that be hurtful? Okay, if somebody insults you, what do? What do many people do? Flip them off, yell back, insult them back. Anger is the, let's say it's like this. Let's say we have 5 units. I said this was quantum, like you can almost measure it. Say we have 5 units of hurt that breaks into your boundary, and you started with 40 units of well-being, a feeling of having enough, a feeling of being full, like after lunch, like you have everything you need. You have enough money, enough love, enough fun, enough sleep, enough health. You have enough. You're nurtured, you're mothered by the world. This diminishes by exactly 5 units. So what's left is 35 units of well-being, and you now have 5 units of anger. See how that works? They do, but now this has transformed into anger. The hurt has now become anger. They do. See? Energy is neither created nor destroyed, too. Newton's second law of thermodynamics. So even when matter and antimatter collide, don't they produce an explosion, and so it's just changed form, right? Because now you have an explosion. They don't collide and then just nothing happens. There's an explosion. We'll talk later about it, okay? In essence, you have diminished your well-being by being the recipient of hurt. What would happen to a kid who gets bullied every day at school? And would that very angry kid potentially grow up to become a bully? So bullying, chronic bullying, can lead to chronic depression. Chronic bullying can also lead to new bullies. Okay? How about terrorists? Want to create some new terrorists? Terrorize some people. Right? They talk about that a lot in the news, right? Create a new nest of terrorists, just terrorize some people. This is what I was talking about regarding value earlier. Oops, keep looking over there. Value, the amount you value someone. The amount you are valued by a woman is the amount you make her happy. Period. If you ever feel devalued, then you're not making the person happy. What you ought to screen for and look for in your life, in friends and in a woman that you choose, is, can the person be made happy? Can they be satisfied? Do they have a satisfaction point? If yes, then you can be valued by that person, and maybe it's effort worthwhile. If they don't have, if they're an endless sinkhole of dissatisfaction, called a pathologic narcissist, sometimes people with personality disorders could be categorized in that way, then it's not going to go well for you. You will just pour endless money, resources, effort, time down this drain of a person and never be valued. Okay? We talk about perfectionism as a boundary problem, where a person's looking out a hole in their boundary and they don't see any limit to what they think they own. So they can't stop and smell the roses. They can't enjoy the journey because they feel entitled to everything imaginable that they see. So no amount of work on your part is ever going to satisfy them. They're a perfectionist.
What I've noticed is some people complain, like that's their normal way of phrasing anything they talk about is to complain about, some coworker or someone, like something that happened to them, and they just complain. And like some of them actually, if you don't really pay attention, they're really easygoing, so it's not real noticeable at first.
Yeah.
But it's exactly like you're saying, then you can't, if they can't be made happy, then they're not going to be good for the long term.
That's right. That's right. And this is where you hear stories of, if we're in a cultural climate where the legal contract called marriage kind of traps you as a male into owing all kinds of things long after there is no longer any value to you, then getting with somebody in the first place in the courtship process who cannot be satisfied is probably a bad idea, because there's a limit to how much stuff you have stored in here at any given time. If you get with a person who is never going to be satisfied, never going to be happy, no matter what you do, this eventually will drain completely dry in you, where you are completely depressed and completely angry, incredibly angry. The loss part belongs far more in the anxiety course that we have. Although anxiety can definitely be a part of a person's depression, it's not quite as important as the well-being part. And since we have a whole separate course on anxiety, I thought I'd just save that. For you guys, I will save it until the end of tomorrow, and we'll go back to it. There's sort of more important stuff for us to look at for now, though. Okay? It'll come back. It certainly comes back in the form of looking at initiation processes, right? Because you got to have fear to truly be getting initiated. Go through a challenge in your life. All right, one other thing that's important, then we're going to take a restroom break. One other thing that's important is paying attention, okay? And this is part of what I'm talking about when I say masculine intelligence, being sentient, being awake and aware to what's going on psychologically among people. And really what's involved here is what is called observing ego. that I talk about in some of my other programs. Observing ego is the ability to self-monitor, to observe your own behavior, and observe an environment you're in simultaneously, and kind of match your behavior to what the environment needs. So that in interacting with women or interacting with people in the workplace, interacting with friends, you tend to say and do the right things in the right way at the right time. And that's simply a scientific definition of cool. Being cool. Could actually define being cool scientifically. It doesn't matter if you're, big or small, tall or short, fat or skinny. As long as you are a cool person, you tend to be a good listener. You tend to do and say the right things in the right way at the right time with people. That's what makes you cool. No matter how you dress, you're cool if you do and say the right things in the right way at the right time. And observing ego is the skill to be self-aware enough to kind of tweak how you communicate with people in a way that gets your message across, where they feel heard, where you really are connecting and having a meeting of the minds. That's observing ego. And what's more, for men, the concept of being at the ready. What is it? The Boy Scouts, where their motto is "Be prepared."